Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth of the NJDEP Rider University webinars for STEM education. This is, oh, I can hear that. Am I getting a feedback? You want to close that door? Thank you. All right, changes, patterns, hazards, and solutions. For those of you who this is their first of these webinars, we're following actually the same pattern that we've done in the past. Oops. All right. The next generation science standards performance measures are listed on the next following pages of this PowerPoint presentation. If you go back to this at a later date, because we are recording this, you'll be able to read through all of the performance measures and the associated cross-cutting concepts and so forth. I've listed the first one for this kindergarten LS1-1 just to show how the full measures are listed on the websites and in the PowerPoint itself, but the following performance measures I'm not listing the entire thing. So what I've done is in the PowerPoint that you'll be able to download, and there are a couple of sites at the end of this which will have all of the places that do have the download available. We do have the entire list of all of the practices, data, connections, the core ideas, as well as the cross-cutting concepts for all of the performance measures in the notes sections of each of the PowerPoints. So the following performance measures are listed just individually, but not with their associated data. And you can go through that, and you'll see the associated data, as I said, in the notes sections of the PowerPoints. Now, each of these performance measures is supported in some way by what we'll be doing during this seminar, during this webinar. And we have approximately 52 minutes left, so I hope that I'll give you some data and information that you can utilize in the classroom as well as in your teaching. If you have questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. I will be looking over that to make sure that I can get as many of the questions and comments shared amongst everybody who is participating. Children are familiar with the concept of what we know as Mother Earth. I'm not trying to be extremely esoteric here. I just wanted to give you this image and to speak first about the Earth is not really a mother, but it does do the things that a mother does. It provides people with what they need. It provides us with with the following. Air, which we all need to breathe, and we all need to make sure that what we're breathing is not polluted, it's as healthy as it can be. New Jersey itself was once known, about 200 years ago, it was known and renowned for the beneficial air. I don't think that we would actually claim that in modern society. But that is also why many of the people who used to come down to the Jersey Shore to enjoy the beneficial air were known as, and they still are known as, Bennies. Mother Earth provides us with water, shelter. This image is not actually from New Jersey, but there are quite a few caves in North Jersey that are explored as well as closed off so people can't get into them. They are the habitat of different animals. If you have questions about that, we actually do have a Caves of New Jersey booklet available on our website. And this represents energy. I know that this is representing the sun, but the entire world's energy source is either the sun or, related to the sun, the breakdown of nuclear particles at the center of the Earth. But pretty much all of our energy comes indirectly from sunlight. If you think about the fossil fuels that we burn, they are in fact fossil sunlight. You're dealing with coal or gasoline, which are the results of living organisms that have died in the past. Those organisms, of course, were dependent upon their food sources. If they were carnivores, they were eating animals. If they were eating vegetables, they were eating the plants that indirectly, or directly I should say, were getting their energy from the sun. So the sunlight gave its energy to the animals, which gave their energy to the oils and coals which we burn today. We are burning, in fact, fossil sunlight. The Earth also provides us with our food, which we grow in the Earth. Now, children today and many adults have lost that connection to their food sources, and when asked, where does your food come from, most children will answer, the supermarket. And when pressed, they will eventually, or hopefully, be able to answer that it does come from a farm. And fewer still will even be able to say that they have grown their own food. And I have a little story I'll throw in here. My daughter, when she was younger, had a friend who would come by our house frequently. My daughter had a friend who would come by frequently, and in our backyard we grew blueberries. And I always had more than enough blueberries than I could eat and my family could eat, so I invited my daughter's friends to enjoy the fruits of our labor, the blueberries themselves. And one of these young ladies said that she wasn't going to be eating the blueberries because her mother didn't let her do it. I asked why her mother wouldn't let her do it, and she didn't know. She came back another day and said her mother said that she can't eat my blueberries because I grow them in the ground. I guess that's opposed to growing on little blue boxes on the shelves in the supermarkets. Now, growing your own food is not a very difficult thing to do, and all schools can actually participate in doing something similar. This is a school, this is outside of New Jersey. Notice the sign says the Oedipal Schoolyard. Many schools in New Jersey participate in the schoolyard habitats programs that are run through the Department of Environmental Protection or the National Wildlife Service or New Jersey Audubon. These schools partner with other organizations, and they can grow their own foods. Some of them even have harvest days where they bring the food into their cafeteria, and the cafeteria people will actually cook it up or include it with their meals. It depends sometimes on the cafeteria service that is being utilized. Some of the providers will not allow for outside foods to be brought in, but many schools have made contracts that allow them to do so. And some schools can actually bring the fruit of their harvests into the school setting. We encourage you to look into doing that. Schoolyard habitats are a very good thing to participate in. They are correlated, many of the aspects of a schoolyard habitat are correlated to the standards, both the New Jersey standards as well as the national Next Generation Science standards and the other standards, which I've somehow just forgotten right now. So I'd like to think about where we all are. Now, most of us are probably sitting in the classroom, on the computer. Some may be at home. Some at work. If you're not a teacher, you may be at another facility, and you're sitting in front of a computer, which, of course, as an environmental educator, what I'd really like you to do is be sitting outside. So take your computer outside with you. It's a beautiful day. You can do that. But we all of our surroundings, whether they're natural or the man-made surroundings, can be traced back and can be utilized as a living classroom. And each of them has a history. Your school, before your school was there, it was something else was there. Most likely it was a farm at one point. Most of New Jersey was farmland at some point. There are more trees in New Jersey now than there were when the founding fathers were here, because at that point most of the forests were cut down and the areas were used as farm fields. So, and each of these areas has particular plants and animals that live there, and they all have specific values. We have a program where we have a term called natural capital, which is actually a term related to what is the value of nature in terms of if you were going to try to recreate it mechanically. So what is the value of a tree? Well, what the tree provides for us is a variety of things. Just a few, for example, that converts carbon dioxide into oxygen that we can breathe. So if you actually knew the amount of carbon dioxide into oxygen, you could actually figure out what would it cost for us to be able to do that with our modern technology, figure out what the tree is worth. And the trees also provide us with shade, try to figure that out. And eventually you'll find that the trees themselves are worth a tremendous amount of money, more than you would think, and that is what we know as natural capital. You can look up that information online to find out some of the numbers. I don't know them off the top of my head. I wasn't actually planning on mentioning it, but it came up. And I mentioned about where we are, and I'd like to bring up Wendell Berry. This term, if you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are. We all have our own individual backgrounds. I was born here in New Jersey. I lived in New York City for a while. Now I'm back in New Jersey again. I've been working for the DEP for 15 years. I live in the suburbs. Actually, I live near the shore, near the Jersey Shore. Everybody asks me if it's just like the television show. I tell them I've never actually seen the show, and I'm proud of that. But no matter where you live, communities change. And we all have seen this. We all know this from our own life experiences. As you drive around, you can probably point out, I remember when this building wasn't here, or I remember when that building wasn't there, or I remember when a building used to be there. So there are always changes. We have a large population in the United States. The population is growing, as it states here. In 1970, 205 million. By 2050, it'll be it'll be around double that. All of these people need places to work, to live. They all need food. As we grow, there are benefits as well as problems. In order to build more houses, you need to take down what's already there. If you're not familiar with the term brownfields, brownfields are existing structures and areas that have already been constructed that are either no longer used or can be used for other purposes. Instead of cutting down more trees to create an area for, let's say, apartment complexes, you can use an old factory. And that's been done in many places around the state. There are many tax incentives to do that as well. Those are known as brownfields. the quotes here and the information here was taken from a Project Learning Tree module called The Places We Live, Exploring Environmental Issues. It is a high school module. The Project Learning Tree program, which I'll also mention a little later, is a K-8 program, and there are several high school modules that have been added to that. I encourage you to look into the Project Learning Tree program. The websites that link to that are listed at the end of this PowerPoint. Now, New Jersey happens to be the 5th smallest state in the United States. Even though we are relatively small, our population density is the greatest in the United States. We have more people per square mile in New Jersey than any other state in the United States. That's not saying that there are more people in New Jersey. There are many more people in other states than there are in New Jersey, but we're all compacted into the 5th smallest state in the country. And even though we do have tremendous amount of people, over 8.25 million, 8.5 million people in the state, there are many places in New Jersey that are very sparsely populated. As you can see on this map, this region in here, which is correlates to Wharton State Park, is pretty much uninhabited, with 1 to 10 people per square mile. Up along High Point State Park, Stokes State Forest, Worthington State Forest, this region up here is also sparsely populated. Also along the Delaware Bay down in here, the populations are relatively low. Notice that the population density is mostly either along the New York down to Philadelphia line, which is known today as the Great Pathway, and then down the Jersey Shore. And even though the Jersey Shore is known here for a very populous area, there are spots still on the Jersey Shore that are very sparsely populated, and that's Atlantic City. It's easy to show children how truly populated the areas are with an image of the way it looks at night. And this is a satellite image taken from outer space, which clearly shows where the population density is the greatest, in the New York, Philadelphia area, and then along the Jersey Shore, and Atlantic City right over here. Cape May is also bright as well, and some areas that you can see here are sparsely populated are quite dark. And these are the places you'd want to go if you want to enjoy the night sky. Up in Stokes State Forest and in High Point State Forest, I highly recommend going up there and spending the day as well as spending the night, because the stars are gorgeous. Now, the geology of our state is quite diverse as well. Even though we are, as I said, the 5th smallest state in the United States, we do have quite a diverse geology. And we have regions in the state which we know as the Highlands and the Valley and Ridge, where the elevation reaches 1,803 feet. That's the highest point in our state. It's known quite appropriately as High Point. And we have regions, and that's, I unfortunately I have my control panel here. I'm going to move that over there. You guys can't see it though, so you don't know what I'm talking about. This is High Point up in this region. This is known as the Valley and Ridge region of the state of New Jersey. It is the highest areas in the state. It is a compression region. It's the result of, the geology there is the result of the continental plates of Africa and North America being in contact with one another 200 million years ago and basically squishing against one another and compressing the rock into metamorphic rocks. It is geologically mostly, well, it is goes back very old, but not the oldest region in the state. The Highlands region is our oldest. It was uplifted many, many millennia ago, millions of years ago, actually about 1 billion years ago, uplifted during another mountain building time in the past. The oldest rocks in New Jersey date back, they're located in this region around here, and they date back to over 1 billion years. As a matter of fact, it's exactly 1,370,000,000 years old, give or take 10 million years or so. That's known as the Highlands region. There's my mouse. This is known as the Piedmont region, and it's relatively high and flat. This area here is known as the Fall Line. It's where many of the waterfalls in New Jersey are found, the Great Falls up in this region, in Paterson here. This area here are the Watchung Mountains, which Watchung meant high hills. There's a series of them, as well as the Palisades here, which were geological formations about 200 million years ago. This region is known as the Intercoastal Plain, and this is the Outer Coastal Plain. Geologically, they are the youngest part of the state, and it's mostly unconsolidated sediments, sand and other sediments. And this region is also the most fertile in the state, giving New Jersey the title the Garden State. And this map here shows New Jersey's open spaces. These are either state parks, state forests, or wildlife management areas. This map also includes the region known as the Pinelands, which is a national reserve, as well as some of the smaller state parks. This does not actually include a lot of the individual county and municipal parks. So there would actually be a lot more green had all of that been included as well. But you can see, even though, again, we are the most populated state per area, we do have approximately 1/4 of our state is represented by forested regions. We also have rivers within New Jersey. New Jersey has approximately 500 miles of what is known as C1 or Category 1 riverways, which are protected to the greatest extent by law. These are rivers that were originally the bills were created for these rivers because of the fact that they were recreational rivers used by fishermen as well as recreational boaters who wanted to ensure that the regions were protected. As a matter of fact, the the Department of Environmental Protection, obviously we are a state agency. We get our monies mostly from taxes. The Division of Fish and Wildlife gets no money from taxes. All of their funds come directly from fishing and hunting licenses and other fees involved in that. This last chart on this page shows the New Jersey climate zones. And the weather is here, the weather and climate changes over time. The climate is, here's the difference between climate and weather. Climate is the general term representing the type of weather that you get over a longer period of time. Climate doesn't change very often. It stays pretty much constant depending upon the season, but weather changes on a daily basis. So if you ask about the climate, you're asking about what is it like generally. If you're asking about the weather, you're asking what is it like today. So these two charts show the average annual precipitation here in New Jersey. Notice it's pretty good. We get about 43 to 46 inches of rain per year on average. This one was done from 61 to 90. And this shows wind speed, and that's the wind speed measured at about 30 meters above the ground. You'll find that wind can be measured differently at different heights, and also in the small confined areas you'll find different wind. It's a nice thing to do is to actually go around your school property and measure the wind on a specific day around the building and create a map of where your where the air is actually flowing. Now these are average annual charts, which means that it's not taking into account what could happen on a specific day. So I'm going to bring up an example of a specific day by using Google Earth, which is a wonderful resource for teachers. This is actually Seaside Heights in September of 2010. And you can clearly see it was a nice day. There are people, not as many as there are in the summer, but there are people playing down here at this park and on the pier out here. And what I'm going to do basically is let this pass through time. Google Earth has the capability of showing you historic imagery. So we're going to go from this day, September of 2010, to today, and pass through a few events that have occurred at this location. That's a recording made with my cell phone that evening that Hurricane Sandy hit. It's a couple of seconds of it. Notice the dramatic change that occurred in Seaside Heights after Sandy hit, and currently the construction going on to repair it and resume its draw. Now, as I mentioned before, weather is a thing that changes day to day. Climate remains pretty much constant for the seasons. These are patterns that people are familiar with because we live it. Kids are familiar with many different patterns in nature. The most obvious one, and the one that they seem to be the most familiar with, is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But the other things include something like day and night. This is a nice image. I like this image. It's a combination of two images superimposed together, day and night. Children understand this pattern. They understand the reason why. They know that the sun appears to move across the sky. Many of them know that it moves from east to west across the sky. Many of them also know that it's not actually moving at all. It's the Earth as it's rotating in its 24-hour cycle, going around it, basically spinning around its axis. And when we look up, the sun appears to rise in the east and set in the west. Depending upon where you are on the Earth, you're actually covering a different amount of space. You're covering the 360 degrees. If you're standing on the North Pole, it takes you 24 hours to rotate around. If you're standing in New Jersey, you're approximately moving at about 900 miles an hour. If you want to have all the data on how these motions are occurring, there's a great Monty Python song known as the Galaxy Song. And it goes into all the numbers and the data about how you're actually moving when we're sitting down going, well, we think we're going nowhere. But you're rotating at 900 miles an hour. You're moving around the sun as well. And we call that moving around the sun the annual motion. And this is an image that I stole off of the web about 2 weeks ago. This is actually a series of photographs taken by, and I'm going to give the credit where credit is due, a gentleman named Eric Solheim, who took several thousand images in his backyard through the course of an entire year, and then cut them up into individual strips and placed them sequentially across this photograph. So what you have here is an entire year from January 1st till December 31st in strips. And you can see it's going through winter, spring, summer, and fall back into winter again. I highly recommend utilizing this picture to demonstrate that children know the seasons. They understand the seasons, even if they don't understand the reasons for the seasons. They may not be familiar with the fact that the Earth, because its axis is off by 23.5 degrees, is facing into the sunlight in the summer and then away from the sunlight, direct lines of the sun in the winter, which gives us our seasons. It also makes the day longer in the summer, up to 15 hours and 9 hours of night. And in the winter, the opposite. It's the same, or they're equal on the 2 days we call equinox, and shortest and longest on the solstices, or sun stop, which is what solstice means. Sun stops its descent on the winter solstice, and then it starts to rise again in the sky. It stops its ascent on the summer solstice and starts going back down again. To children, the idea that the sun is actually closer to the Earth by about 1 million miles or so in January than it is in June is confusing, but it's not to deal with how close you are. It has to deal with the angle of the sunlight. And you can demonstrate that by taking a flashlight and shining it straight down onto a piece of paper. The circle is much smaller, but when you angle this flashlight and turn your hand sideways, now there's not a circle of light, but a big, huge oval of light, and there's less light in a specific spot, which means that there's not going to be as warm. So that's one demonstration to use for kids if you want to show them the reasons for the seasons. Now, I said weather changes on a daily basis. Children today have a lot more access to weather reports than we had when we were younger, and I'm probably older than most of you anyway. So here's just an example taken a few weeks back when I was putting together this PowerPoint, or starting to anyway. Trenton, it was 41 degrees, and the precipitation was 20%, and basically I went online and I got this. I didn't have to go online. I could have just watched television and found out anything I wanted to know about the weather. Or nowadays you can just look at your app on your cell phone, or listen to the radio, or God forbid, just look outside and you can see what the weather is like. Weather data can be collected and utilized. I'm going to refer to this chart, which is something that I actually created back in, I believe, 1995 for my students. This was pre-internet days. The internet existed, but there really wasn't a tremendous amount on it. And I was looking for a list of weather symbols that I could utilize in my classroom with my 4th through 6th graders. And there really wasn't a lot out there, so I went and put this one together myself based on a whole mess of different ones. And this is now posted on the department's environmental education website. It's also linked to the state climatologist's office through Rutgers. This weather station symbols chart, even though, as I said, I created it for my students, it is now extremely popular on the internet. We actually get several thousand hits to this individual page every month, and amazingly, over the course of the last few years, I've noticed that it has made its way into 2 textbooks. It has made its way into several curriculum designs. It's now included in the city of San Francisco requires that their teachers utilize this chart. It's the state of Connecticut actually has this one referenced on their Department of Ed website, as does the state of Massachusetts, the state of Florida, Alberta, Canada, and a few other places and California. So I was truly honored by that. I was also impressed that when Georgia put this on their website, they took off the Department of Environmental Protection, New Jersey on the top and put in their department's name. But when Oregon took it, they wrote on the top, stolen from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So I liked that, and anytime anybody wants to use something from a state website, they are free to do so. It is, if it's on a state website and it's not copyright description written already, it's free to be used. But having said stolen, I called up the person at the Department of Ed in Oregon and said, anything you want we would love to have you steal it from us, as long as you give us that type of credit. So this chart shows a variety of different things, and I'll just give you a basic overview of it. The series of circles here shows cloud coverage. Depending upon how much of the circle is filled in, it shows you how much clouds are in the sky. If you'd like to do a little story on clouds, we all are pretty familiar with clouds. We know that some look very fluffy, some look very wispy, some look flat, and some are rainy. And there was a gentleman who actually named the clouds. His name was Luke Howard, and he had actually named the clouds when he was still a teenager. And he named them fluffy and wispy and rainy and flat. And those are the names we still use today for all the clouds that we see in the sky. However, he didn't name them the English terms, so he named them the Latin terms. So what is the Latin term for fluffy? Well, that's cumulus. The Latin term for flat was stratus. The Latin term for wispy is cirrus. The Latin term for rain is nimbus, and we use those all today. So Luke Howard was a teenager when he came up with that. You can relate that to your teenage students if you have any at that point. If you're teaching the older middle school and high school, they can relate to that. If you want to go back even further, the invention of the telescope was probably a 9-year-old boy. No one knows his name. It was his master, Hans Lippershey, who has the credit for it, but it was actually the boy who created the telescope in the first place. So anyway, this chart here shows the direction of the wind. The arrow points to the direction the wind is coming from, not the way it's going. This is a series of these little pins, and they're attached to the outside of the cloud coverage. You can see that here, cloud coverage and these little pins. They show the speed of the wind. One mark up here means 5 knots, a longer mark is 10, 20, 25, and so forth. This represents the different types of clouds that can be seen in the sky. This is the weather conditions, so these little asterisks here represent snow, light, moderate, or heavy, and so forth. Different symbols for the different types of coverage you find in the sky. Barometric tendency is a little difficult to go over with kids. If you have a barometer, you can show them. I'm not going to reference that. I'll just reference this again. Now, this model down here then shows how these are all put together. So here you have your cloud coverage, and you can see that this one is half of the sky is covered with clouds. We have our wind speed, which in this case is 25 knots, and the arrow points in the direction it's coming from, so it's coming from the east, traveling west. We have the temperature in this chart here at 76 degrees, and there is a moderate drizzle in the sky coming down from some developing cumulus clouds. And yes, our barometric pressure has been rising and then stayed off. So using this chart, which is available online, and using types of things that measure these, as well as observation, students can create weather maps. They can do one of their own school area or at home. Schools can purchase very exotic weather stations. This one includes a thermometer and an anemometer, or a wind speed meter, a wind direction. It's solar panel powered. It has a rain gauge inside to collect the rain. Or you can make them out of things that are found around the home and classroom. This one is made out of recycled materials. This is your rain gauge right here, which is an old soda container. The anemometer is a straw on a stick with a couple of, many cases they use Dixie cups or other things. Temperature is measured using red food coloring. Of course, you don't do that in the winter because your thermometer would freeze over. You can use alcohol, but I don't recommend that for little kids. Now, using this kind of data, then students can come up with some pretty exotic charts. This is pretty confusing. I'm going to actually use one that's even more confusing. But I used to do this with my 4th graders and my 6th graders, and very quickly do the kids actually catch on to all this. These are isobars. They represent pressure areas. High pressure means the area, the air is coming down. That usually means that the air is cooler. Cool air settles. Warmer air rises. Where the area is warmer, you get low pressure zones where that air is now rising up. Usually when you have a low pressure zone, air has to come in and take its place, so you get wind going into those directions. You can see that happen here, coming from this direction. Wind is, well, going in that way, in that direction. But using this information here, let's see, as you take a look, and using this chart here, oops, didn't want to do that. Using this chart here, let's answer the questions. See if you can do so by typing in your answer in the chat area. But where is the sky completely covered by clouds? Now, this is a nice activity, too, because now students can not only apply their sciences, but you can also apply your geography as well. And I used to, my first year teaching, I asked my 7th graders, what's west of New Jersey? And their answer was California. What's south of New Jersey? And their answer was Florida. So I knew, I said, what about the states in between? And most of the kids couldn't name them. I then taught them the song with all the states in it, and there's a couple that are out there. I highly recommend the one done by the Animaniacs, even though that's probably before the time of many of the kids nowadays. I still have those CDs. You've got all the states, you've got all the capitals, you've got all the presidents up until Clinton anyway. You've got all the countries at that time. They actually go through all the countries really fast. It's really exciting. And if you like that kind of stuff and you want to teach chemistry, you got Tom Lehrer's The Elements song, which I learned to sing by the time I was about 8 because my father was a chemist. So now let's see. Has anybody answered yet? Nobody has answered yet. And I will answer then if you can't. Where is this guy completely covered? Well, wherever you find the complete black circles. So there's one here. There's one off over here. There's one down over here. So the answers is Montana, Baja California, Albuquerque, and in the Atlantic Ocean. This was not supposed to be over there. That was supposed to be over here, but I got a bump down because of something on this computer. It's not the one I wrote this on. Where are the fastest winds located? Well, you're looking for these symbols, and as many of these as you can find on it. The kids will look around, and you will find that this one right here has 40 knots. So the fastest winds are located off the New Jersey coastline. Nice. What time of the year is represented here? Anybody want to type this? See if you can figure it out. Just look at the temperatures. Nobody. Well, thank you. I know, you're all just overwhelmed with listening to me. The answer is winter. And then last, if it's winter, where is it snowing? And so you're looking for, in this case, the little asterisk symbols. And those with keen eyes will find them here in Nevada, there, as well as up here in Quebec. Oh, and Pennsylvania too, over there. So these are the kind of things that you can do with the kids. And if they do their own local weather charts on a daily basis, if you just write down the data, now many of the more advanced units, the electronic ones, will actually have, if you have the weather station on the roof of the building, it'll actually download all the information right to a computer or on a screen on the side of the room. You can have that data, and the students can compare them on a daily basis, and they can make predictions about what will happen on the next day. And this is something that I used to have my students do, and they were approximately accurate as often as they were on television. You never have perfect accuracy when you're dealing with weather, but when you have a group of students who are 10-year-old who can do as well as Al Roker on channel whatever he is on or whatever, that's pretty impressive, and the kids love it too. Now I'm going to go back to Google Earth again and look at a couple of other patterns. These are actually not natural patterns, but man-made patterns that have an impact on not only the environment, but the things that live in that environment as well. And this image is taken from Google Earth and historic data, the historic images. This is December of 2002. So this may be even older than many of the students. And this is the Garden State Parkway over here. And Route, I believe this is Route 66. This is the township of Neptune and Tinton Falls in Monmouth County. And what I'd like you to do is basically notice this different areas of farmland, as well as this region in here. This is an office complex, very large one. I think it used to be, I think it's currently AIG. And this region back here was all owned by AIG as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump ahead 5 years. And you can see a few changes. You'll notice that there are, God, where's my mouse? I've lost my mouse. Oh, there's my mouse. There are buildings, new construction, as well as a roadway that's going in here. You'll notice also, I mentioned the AIG property. It's all trees here. AIG owned this property, and for many years, they actually had a series of employees worked for the company, not doing what most of the employees in the building did, but they were maintaining this property. They were maintaining this property as a tree farm, and it was an advantage to them because of New Jersey's tax laws and allowed them to take a massive deduction in their taxes. So I'm going to jump ahead now again, this time to September of 2013, and you can't help but miss the Jersey Shore outlet mall there. You can still again see that area where the highway, the overpass was built. This road, of course, continues. This was added since the 2007 image. This was to compensate for all the traffic that was going to be going into this large, this mall here. Notice that AIG did sell off some of their property, and so their tree farm is a little bit less. So they had to, the townships had to compensate for the different amount of traffic that was coming into the area, and this does bring in a tremendous amount of traffic. So the roadways had to be different, but that wasn't the only thing that changed. Initially, when this was being planned, this is in the township of Neptune, and the township of Tinton Falls lies below that. And what happened was the township here, you have to think about the natural environment here. It was mostly farmland, but the land itself accepted the rain that fell on it and that was absorbed into the ground. With this much of a footprint of impervious surface or blacktop, that rain wouldn't go down into the ground, and it would eventually work its way down into the Shark River, which is not ready to receive that much water. It would have changed the topography of the land. The township of Tinton Falls didn't want Neptune to build this because they weren't ready for any of the storm water overflow. Their existing municipality storm flow controls wouldn't have been able to handle that much excess water. So the township of Neptune had to make a lot of different water resourced, they had to put in areas where the water was going to be contained. This is known as a retention basin. There's another one over here. They put in several different regions along here where the water could get into the ground quicker to keep the water from actually overflowing into the other towns. And so the water that would collect and run down into Tinton Falls was actually a lot less than what would have normally been had the construction been the normal way that construction is actually handled. This kind of thing happens in every town when new things are created. They need to go through an environmental review, or what's known as an environmental impact statement. You can find out your local impact statements by just going to your municipality. Many of them have an environmental commission that is very willing to share with schools. They love it when schools get involved with their workings. The environmental commissions in most municipalities across the state don't have, well, they refer to themselves as not having massive teeth, which means they really don't have that much of an impact on what the municipalities decide on. Some of them do have more impact than others, but when they have the constituents, the towns, especially the students involved, they have, I guess they can bear bigger teeth that way and get the students involved as well. And as you can see, this region here, everybody probably is familiar with the Jersey Shore outlets. They are doing quite well for their communities. There's a lot of tax incoming from those properties, and the water resources were not overstrained because of the construction. However, it did have an impact on other things that were there at the time. For example, the animals that live there. And each of these animals needs the same things that everybody else needs. The plants as well. We all need those resources. We need the air, we need the water, we need the shelter, we need food, we need an energy source of some type. So these are what the animals need, and all of these had to give up something when the Jersey Shore outlet or any new construction goes into place. So you may be familiar with the different birds on this page, but you may not have seen them in your community, even though all of these are native to New Jersey and are found throughout the state. Where I live, I often see goldfinches, which is our state bird, and yet I never see bluebirds in my community. They're pretty much really not shorebirds. However, if you go into, for example, the Forest Resource Education and Center in Jackson, which is run by the Department of Environmental Protection, you can't avoid them. They're all over the place. And each of these birds has little differences among them that allow them to exist in their own communities. So, for example, you can see that the goldfinch's beak is quite different than a bluebird's beak. It's because they eat different foods. Children, you can give the children the opportunity, give them a couple of examples of the type of things that birds eat, try to figure out which eats which. Goldfinch has a nice nut-cracking beak, as does a cardinal, and a grosbeak up here. Birds of prey, such as this hawk and the owls, have mouths that are made for tearing up prey animals, the different prey that these animals eat. And notice that the chickadee here has a similar bill to the bluebird. So each of these animals has adaptations that make it suitable to its own environment, as well as fish, reptiles, amphibians. Each of these animals also lived in the areas that construction has taken them away from them. They've either moved on to other regions, they've either died and gone and don't exist in those regions anymore, or in many cases they adapt to those regions. We all see squirrels in our yards and chipmunks. They seem to thrive in the built environment as well as they do out in the natural world. as I said, I live on the shore, and I've seen many, or I live near the shore, and in the streams that are near my house, I often see turtles, and people are surprised. Even the neighbors don't even notice them that frequently, but they're there. I've had a few in my backyard over the years. I've had different encounters with wildlife. And I think probably because I'm more aware of it, I'm prone to see it more often. People who are not really that prone to see it will change dramatically when you kind of inform them that these animals are there. So here's just a few examples of a couple of the mammals that are native to New Jersey. You've probably seen chipmunks and deer. If you're out in the evenings in the summer and the spring, you may be seeing a bat, even though you may think at first that that's a bird. Bats are a wonderful creature. They eat up to 500 mosquitoes a night each. So there's a lot of wildlife out there, and the encounters are quite frequent here in New Jersey. As I've said, we are the most populated state per area in the country per people. But surprisingly, we're also the most populated state per area for black bears and for white-tailed deer. So our encounters with them will be far more frequent than in many other places. We've taken away a lot of their habitats, and so they move. And when they move across a highway, I've encountered deer on the highway. I've hit one in my life so far. I'm sure many people have done the same. If you haven't done that, well, then lucky you. I've also encountered them as walking through the woods. I've encountered them in my own backyard. As a matter of fact, with the typical animals that you do encounter, like squirrels and chipmunks, I've encountered raccoons and possum and porcupines, owls, snakes, both poisonous and non-poisonous. Not the poisonous ones in my backyard. I encountered them up in North Jersey. While changing cleaning out a birdhouse from my front yard, a peregrine falcon landed right in front of me. We were nose to nose. I don't think it saw me at first when it landed, and turned around, and I turned around, and we practically were about an inch away from each other, nose to nose. And my reaction, of course, was, holy yes, kids, get out here, you got to see this, to my children. It flew away, but they did get to see it flying away. Rarely do you have an encounter with an animal that can tear your face off, but to me it was, wow, that was incredible. Sometimes we're more dangerous to them than they are to us. Some of the encounters can be considered controversial. Many people look upon hunting as a negative, and many people see the positives of hunting. I'm not going to point out any of them right now. That's something that you can discuss with your students. If you are a hunter, then it brings more to the table. If you're against it, you can bring up your points. Just remember that as a controversial issue or an environmental issue, that's something that has 2 points of view. An environmental problem, such as this one, there's no 2 points of view about it. Bears are a nuisance when they are used to people and can be very dangerous. And people can do something about that, like locking up their garbages and that kind of things to keep the bears out. And no matter how hard you try, they will try to get in again. All right. So utilizing this information and what you've seen during this webinar, please look over this when you have a chance. You can read it here or you can read it at a later date. But utilizing the science in STEM and in the next generation science standards has benefits to the students, benefits for the teachers, now I mentioned the difference between issues and problems. When you're dealing with environmental issues, you have 2 points of view or multiple points of view. Here's a nice process for addressing that. This was taken from the EE Toolbox, put out in 1994, Approaching Environmental Issues in the Classroom. I encourage you to look into organizations such as the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education, or ANGE, and the North American Association of Environmental Educators, NAAEE, which is a national, actually it's an international organization. The link for ANGE and the SEEDS website, which is maintained by the DEP, is at the end of this PowerPoint. Both of those link to NAAEE and pretty much everything else that's been mentioned so far. I'm reading somebody's comment here. Yes, I happen to agree with you there. I'm seriously out to promote actual paper maps as well. I know that most people nowadays have their GPS units, they have their phone. I've been using mine. I used to do orienteering with children, and it used to be part of what's known as the Science Olympiad, and you actually had to use real compasses. But when students started showing up with their cell phones, they had to get rid of the orienteering section activity because it wasn't real anymore. It was all just pop out the cell phone and there you go. And even though I happen to have one on my cell phone as well, and yes, I have multiple maps. I was giving away thousands for a while. I still have a few maps left, and actually, for those people interested in the earth sciences, May 23rd, I think it is the date for the New Jersey Earth Science Teachers Conference, which will be held up at the Sterling Hill Mine Museum in North Jersey. It's up in Ogdensburg, Franklin area, and you can go to the Nagesta website. It's listed at the end of this as well. Okay, I'm going to pop in this. Here's some critical thinking skills as well as problem-solving skills that can be utilized when dealing with these issues and problems, and assessment ways measuring your success. As I said, we'll have this available online as well. The link will be at the writer's site as well as the DEP, so you can read through these at your leisure. Here are some tips for teachers. We encourage you to get out and do as much as you can outside, as well as bring the outside in. Not just the natural world outside, but utilize what's out there. Utilize your parents, the parents of the students. They often have interesting careers that can relate to what you're doing in the classroom. Bring in your community members. Use them, for example, as a resource, perhaps even financially. You may be able to find that you can get money through the PTA to do projects, or even go to the local banks. Tell them you're working on a project. Banks have all the money. They like to have good PR, and most of them have a line item list in their financial records for school facilities. I recommended these organizations earlier. I mentioned PLP, Project Learning Tree. These are some of the others in the state. We have Project WET. Project Learning Tree deals with forestry issues, put out by the American Forestry Association. WET deals with Water Education for Teachers. It's a nice little acronym. It deals with water. And WILD deals with wildlife. Each of these has a workshop that is given on a regular basis throughout the state. You can go to the website that is listed at the end to find the dates for these workshops. It's between $5 and $15 per workshop. You get a book. The books are on the side there on the right that have hundreds of activities where the biggest expense may be just photocopying or finding some things around the house that you can do the activities with. And they are all in the process of being correlated to the next generation science standards. Project Learning Tree also runs something called the Green Schools program. You can look at that, follow up on that. New Jersey Eco Schools program is run through New Jersey Audubon Society, or New Jersey Audubon. It's actually a program that is actually run through the National Wildlife Federation, but in New Jersey, it's housed at New Jersey Audubon, and the contact person for that is Jennifer Dowd. New Jersey, the Sustainable Jersey for Schools program is a newer program. If you're familiar with the New Jersey the Sustainable Jersey program, which involves municipalities doing environmentally friendly things, the New Jersey Sustainable Jersey for Schools program is basically an offshoot of that, where schools are now invited to participate and can get points for different things that they're doing. All of these are wonderful steps up to perhaps getting yourself and your school registered as a nationally honored Green Ribbon school. If you're familiar with the Blue Ribbon program, that's for academic achievement. Green Ribbon schools are environmental achievement. And if you want to learn a little bit about that, you can go to those websites that are listed at the end. They link to the Green Ribbon program. The Green Ribbon program, even if you don't win, if you even just look over the requirements and look at some of the things that are recommended to get those that are listed for what are known as 3 pillars, you can see where your school could do better and move yourself in that direction, because we have found that schools that are more environmentally friendly are also financially friendly as well. Costs go down in many cases. This is a list of those different websites I've mentioned. This is the SEEDS website. I encourage you to go to the SEEDS website and click on the environmental or EED news. You will get, it's a little late now because we're overwhelmed with Earth Day, and I encourage everybody to do something next Wednesday on Earth Day or around the Earth Day. Have a happy Earth Day. It's every year on April 22nd, and most of the schools are in session at that point. You can go to the Earth Day website, which is earthdaynj.org, and find out about things in your community if you'd like to bring your own children or think about spreading the word to your students and their families. There are things that are on that page. There's approximately 70-something different events throughout the state, and I haven't found them all yet, but I'm trying, that are listed there. You can go to many of these different events and enjoy the earth. And just remember that we really do need to, Christmas is once a year, Earth Day should be every day. But I encourage you to go to the website, sign up for Environmental Ed News. You'll get information on environmental jobs, volunteer opportunities, careers for the students, things that you might want to do, events that are coming up, professional development workshops, and things that you can utilize in your classroom. The links on the side there are the SEEDS website. The DEP also maintains a school facilities website, which deals with issues that would not be for classroom, but for things like administrators and maintenance people, like HVAC and water conservation and other issues within the school property per se. Then you have the teachnjenv.org, which would take you to the projects pages where you can learn all about when the projects have their different workshops, as well as what other resources they have available. ANGIE is the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education. Every year they have a conference at the end of January. They just had theirs at the end of January. The next one is the end of January next year, 2016. They already have information about that, and I encourage everybody to attend that conference. If you've never been to an education conference before, this shouldn't be the first one you go to, because they are such fun that you'll think that everyone after that, from that point on, stinks. I was going to say something different. But if you have been to other conferences, definitely go to the ANGIE one, and you'll see how much fun it really is. The last is the NJESTA website. That's New Jersey Earth Science Teachers Association. I like to promote that one because I'm currently the president. So, yes, I'm not just the hair club for men. Well, anyway, that's that for this workshop. I hope you've enjoyed this and hope you've gotten something educationally beneficial to you. Thank you for participating, and I hope that everybody has a great evening. And again, have a great Earth Day and Earth Week next week.